I think we should turn to your questions now. We'll leave that up. Should be giving our kids omega-3 and omega-6. Well, what's your answer? Yes. Okay. We're gonna, yes is a very simple answer. You can't overload someone in anything, and this is what we have to work out. There appears to be a deficiency of omega-3 in particular. And that's important because if someone doesn't have enough omega-3, when an infection occurs, the inflammatory system tends to go out of control or tends to become overactive. And the overactive inflammatory response increases protein breakdown, increases muscle breakdown. And so for any infection that someone gets, and all the little Barth kids are going to be getting infections fairly frequently, the less inflammation they have, the better they're going to get through an illness. But again, if you give too much fish oil, it can increase bleeding. So it probably will require measuring these levels in the blood. You just can't take 2 or 3 capsules of fish oil a day. So we know that fish oil probably will be needed, and probably the simplest way of doing that is fish oil. So I've already told you about the arginine study. Why are some of the children on CoQ10? CoQ10 is a very useful vitamin it's really not a vitamin, it's made in the body, that I use in treating almost all other mitochondrial problems. I've tried CoQ10, and it's sort of standard. If someone has a mitochondrial disease, a doctor says you should take CoQ10. I've tried CoQ10 many times over the past 25 years. I had a research study on CoQ10 alone 25 years ago. It's never done anything that I could tell. It's not going to hurt, but except your pocketbook. But I've not seen any benefit from it. And the same thing actually holds to carnitine. The argument, I would give carnitine to someone with Barth syndrome only if the carnitine is deficient. It's just like CoQ. Many doctors, especially metabolic doctors, feel that carnitine should be given to every metabolic disease, and it is given to almost every metabolic disease, but technically there are only 2 diseases in which it's been shown to be beneficial. But they give it because they say, well, it can't hurt. Well, it can hurt in Barth syndrome if you go too high. And the child who was rescued from Barth heart failure because he was given pantothenic acid, that was a child who had carnitine poisoning. And pantothenic acid will rescue someone from carnitine poisoning. So that's I don't think you need carnitine. I don't think you need CoQ. Probably it's good to measure those things. I can't go into it at this talk, but there is a reason CoQ theoretically could be a little bit low, but I haven't seen it yet, I should say. I've measured it. Why do you recommend cornstarch at night? Cornstarch extends the ability of the body to maintain blood sugar. If you cannot, it lasts like 6 hours. If the body cannot, if you cannot maintain blood sugar, which is normal, blood sugar falls overnight, muscle is broken down to make blood sugar. Simplest way, so we want to conserve as much muscle as we can. If you give cornstarch, then it conserves muscle, as simple as that. It's not necessary unless someone's sleeping like 8 hours a night. It doesn't add much benefit if you're only sleeping 6 hours a night. So glycogen from the liver lasts for 4 to 5, 6 hours sometimes. Glycogen, if one takes a gram per kilo, may add an extra 2 or 3 hours. So that helps. And we've seen some boys who get a lot better from it. One of the signs that process is overactive, the process of breaking down protein and make glucose, is sweating, kids who sweat at night. And as soon as you start giving cornstarch, the sweating stops. Your views on salt. Barth boys eat all sorts of strange things, and every time we've looked into it, there's been a good reason for it. So unless a child is in heart failure, I should probably not be quite so glib, but explain that if a child is in heart failure, I think what may be going on there is it may be one of these hormone problems, that the kidney is not holding on to salt normally. That's regulated by a hormone called aldosterone. If someone is in heart failure, aldosterone goes way up, and then you have to be careful. Then you're retaining all the salt your body needs, and then some. But if a child is not in heart failure, and they really want salt, they're craving salt. Well, they're craving salt because they need salt. And this is one of the many things we have to address, whether it is truly an aldosterone problem, and then try to figure out a way to fix it. What I'm hoping is that if we can straighten out the lipid biochemistry throughout the body, all the hormones will start working again. And it's only some hormones, all those that are impaired will start working. Is there anything to help stop vomiting? Most vomiting that I've seen in Barth syndrome is due to overfeeding. And that I'd hope to have together some more specific dietary prescription for that. Pardon me. But suffice to say that the caloric, so there are several reasons why the caloric requirement of I can show this. This is what happens to, so for a small infant, about 30% of calories go to growth. But almost all Barth kids don't grow at a normal rate. They're growing, but they're falling off the growth curve. This is a significant reduction. If you just look at the slope of the curve, that's a significant reduction in calories that are required for growth, from 30% to 20%. So there's 10% that you don't need. So you're 10% below the recommendation. Also, if your muscle mass is reduced, and this process of losing weight here is principally a reduction in muscle mass. Muscle is one of the largest users of energy in the body. Muscle, heart, and muscle, brain, and liver use most energy. So if the muscle mass is only half the normal amount, that may be another 10% down. And then there's the physical activity part, which is a relatively small percentage. So we can say, right off the top, that the average Barth infant, all other things being equal, probably needs only 80% of the recommended caloric requirement. And the problem is that doctors and dietitians will look at the growth chart and say, Johnny's falling off the growth chart. He's really only eating 80% of what he should be eating. Therefore, he's falling off the growth chart because he's not eating enough. And then they get a G-tube, and they look like Buddha or the Michelin Man. And we've seen that, and it can be a major problem in terms of feeding issues throughout one's life. And it's very important to recognize that some doctors do, some doctors don't. And more often, unfortunately, they don't. And this is a major issue during infancy, as I was saying. And until we get this sort of written up and published and out there for the doctors to find, if you run into any major issues with that, contact me or contact Nicole Clayton to work with your doctor or dietitian. So if there are other issues with vomiting, I'm not aware of a general cause of vomiting in the older child. It's a complicated issue. There could be other reasons, but I can't get into that right now. Are there any diet changes that we consider? I think I addressed that. What can be done to prevent GI problems like diarrhea? Okay, I have a slide for that one. So, if there's a block here, there's an increase in citrate here. And citrate is has many functions besides the citric acid cycle. It also produces acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA is made in various ways, but in the cytoplasm of the cells. This is the mitochondria, and we'll call this the cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm, acetyl-CoA comes from citrate. Acetyl-CoA is needed to make acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the major neurotransmitter of the gut. It makes the gut move. And I found by trial and error, I should say there's a phenomenon in other mitochondrial disease, the exact opposite of Barth syndrome, where the children's gut doesn't work. And they can end up on tube feeding, or intravenous feedings the rest of their life. And I found that if you simply, and it turns out I think the mechanism there is that in those children, this system is working, but they have to conserve every little bit of citrate to keep the Krebs cycle going. And therefore, there's no citrate left to make acetyl-CoA. And the first child with what's called intestinal pseudoobstruction, I treated, was having like one bowel movement every other day with a lot of help, that is drugs. And I gave her citrate, and she stooled 10 times the next day. And so we now treat soot obstruction with citrate. And I suspect that it could be the exact opposite here. The diarrhea we see in Barth syndrome is hypermotility. It just goes straight through. And that's, I suspect that is what's going on, that the high citrate is maximizing the level of acetylcholine, and the gut is moving extremely rapidly. So we're still working on it. That the only recommendation I can make is to have a trial of keeping all this fruit juices, or citrus juices out of the meal, out of your diet as you can, and read all the labels, because citrate is sometimes used as an additive. But in each person, give that a trial. It may not be relevant to some children, but right now all I can say is see what happens if you avoid citrate. Unfortunately, citrate is in some foods that are very good for you. But it's something, if you're having trouble with diarrhea, make an all-out effort to eliminate citrate from the diet and see if that makes a difference. If it makes no difference whatsoever, I'd be interested to know. So what I can say now, this is my operating hypothesis about hypermotility in Barth syndrome. Can these boys get stronger with exercise? Yes. What the physiology studies have shown is that the muscle in Barth, there are two types of muscle in everyone, in most muscles in the body, so-called type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is what holds the body up, so-called postural muscle. It uses mitochondria for energy. Type 2 muscle is what's called white muscle, or fast twitch muscle. It uses starch for energy. It has some mitochondria, but it doesn't use mitochondria to make energy. It uses starch. And it works very rapidly, but it doesn't last very long. But when someone lifts weights, does isometric exercise, that builds up only type 2 muscle. And in other individuals with mitochondrial diseases, we use this routinely, where they usually the older kids who want to be able to do more, if they lift weights and go to the gym in a carefully graded exercise program, not all out, there can be a substantial increase in muscle mass. The negative side, or the difficult part of that, is you have to keep doing it. If you stop that kind of training, most of that muscle is gone in about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So you just have to make it a regular part of one's life if you find that it really helps. Of course, one's protein nutrition, one's amino acid biochemistry has to be good during that period of time. So you should first get that worked out and then introduce an exercise program. There was a drug trial based on gentamicin. Yeah, there is a drug trial using gentamicin. It's sort of a genetic engineering type of thing, and if it works, it's going to work with a very specific small group of patients with Barth syndrome, or with a certain type of mutation. So it's not going to be of general use for Barth syndrome. It's far from being proven to be successful. There are some trials going on in other disorders, but it's just not ready. It's not ready for prime time. Could we, or should we have our serotonin levels checked? I think that question, pardon me, this is terrible. I think that comes from the point that I discussed with some families. So the answer to that is no. Measuring serotonin is not going to help. There are some individuals, and I don't think it's very common in Barth syndrome, have suppressed appetite because they absorb, their brain absorbs too much of an amino acid called tryptophan. So if certain amino acids are low, other amino acids can be absorbed at an increased rate, one of which is tryptophan. When tryptophan is absorbed, or it goes into the brain, it's converted into a compound called serotonin. And serotonin suppresses appetite. And there have been some other disorders where I've given another amino acid that blocks tryptophan from getting in the brain, and the children start eating right away. And it's one called isoleucine. You're not going to find that on any shelf anywhere. And we're exploring that. I'm willing to try that in certain situations, but it clearly works. For example, children who are on Ritalin lose their appetite. If you give that child isoleucine, their appetite comes back. So it does work in a general way, but we don't want to cause one amino acid problem while solving another one. So it's out there. It may become more. We'll know more about it next time, I hope. How am I doing on time? We have time for more questions? What? What?
It's 10 o'clock.
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know when I'm supposed to stop. I'm supposed to stop, right? Yeah. Oh, questions there? Oh, which question?
Have you finished all your questions on the cards?
Hold on, I'm trying to see. How could we determine a daily intake for our boys? Almost like a daily meal plan. So I've addressed those questions, and I say we're going to put together something more formal. We do think they need arginine and cysteine. We have to make sure they're not being overfed. We have to make sure they're getting the right amount of amino acids. One of the problems we've had with Barth syndrome in terms of protein is that some of the younger children, if they get too much protein, they become sick. We now understand why that happens. If they get too little protein, or if they don't get an increased amount of protein, they can get worse. If they take too much of that protein, they can also get worse. So we have to, unfortunately, measure amino acid levels. At least at first, you got some sense of where someone should be. And as I say, we hope you shall have a dietary prescription or better dietary guidelines within the next year. And the other part of the question here is about supplementing with oils, which I've already addressed. So I wouldn't run out and get arginine and cysteine and eat that. I would certainly support using the dietary plans of foods that are high in arginine and cysteine. That's not going to hurt anything. I think that if one goes to the point of using arginine and cysteine, then it has to be done, at least right now, under a doctor's direction. I can do it. I'm limited to how much I can do it. I've been treating a subset of boys that I've had some direct contact with, or my own patients. But for others, it may have to be through a cooperating doctor. Obviously, I'll explain everything and why, and most amino acids. If they think carnitine is benign, definitely an amino acid is should be benign. But it's like when you're giving a large amount of anything, one has to be careful, even though it's a normal component of the diet. I think that's everything.
We're getting short on time.
Yeah.
There's one or two questions, but we need your handheld mic.
What?
We need that handheld mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Taping all the
Yeah,
sessions.
right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. You told us that the threonine level of the most boys are too high, and the arginine and cysteine level is sometimes too low. Isn't it necessary to choose food that is low in threonine and high in arginine and cysteine instead of offering only food that is high in arginine and high in cysteine?
I'm sorry, I have a little trouble hearing.
Is the relation arginine threonine really important when you select a food? For example, for Leo, I choose often food that is low in threonine and high in arginine, like lentils, for example, or peas. And for example, meat is high in arginine, but it's also high in threonine.
But what being referred to here, that one of the peculiarities is a high level of threonine in the blood. It's twice normal. It's hard for me to think of that itself causing a problem. I have to figure out why it's high. It's telling us something. Right now, because I can't think of a way that it's causing harm. I know why low arginine is causing harm. I can't think of why threonine is causing harm. Most amino acids at twice normal level do not cause trouble. it's telling us something about what's going on inside the mitochondria. So it's an important clue that we have to try to figure out. But right now, I would make no dietary adjustments based on threonine. There's no particular reason to lower threonine.
One more question? Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Okay.